Hey, I'm Bernard with Onstage Hair Extensions. We're going to talk about the cut. Listen, you can make a haircut as complicated as you want. You can watch tons of YouTube videos with all these weird cutting techniques. I like to kind of break it down, keep it simple to start with, and then you can advance from there if you like. But I'm just going to be using a pair of scissors and a pair of thinning shears. Sure, a razor does a great job on cutting and blending hair extensions, but most people are taught or at least know how to use scissors or shears, whatever you want to call them, and thinning shears or thinning scissors. And I'm going to go through 5 simple steps, 5 simple areas. Sometimes you don't need the last 2 steps in this haircut, but I'm going to go over each one. I won't be doing them in detail because most of her hair is already cut, but I just want to show you what we do. First thing we do is step 1. Part the hair in the center and the back. So look, we parted her hair straight up the center. She's got wefts and strands in, so it's not going to look like a perfectly straight, clean part, but I did run my finger right up the back, separated it, brought it to the front. So here in the front, what happens is if the hair from the center and the back travels the furthest, it'll be the longest, right? In the middle. So when I pull the hair into the back, it's going to already have this natural arc to make it look really natural. Also, the client is always saying, cut my hair here, and they can't point to the back of their head or the back of their back. So they usually do something in the front up here. So they look here, they look in the mirror, they try to figure it out. And then when you're getting ready to cut it, you just want to make sure their chin is here because they're tempted to look down at it and it changes all of the angle of the hair. And so when I go to cut, I just want to make sure she's straight forward. I get in this area, and right before I go to cut, I block the mirror on accident, and she can't see herself anymore, so she tries to look down. So right before I cut, I check right here to make sure she's here, and then I come in here and I cut this length as straight across as I can with a little bit of a point cut. You can kind of cheat this, pull it all together, and in one section, cut this one length like this. Now, when I say cut one length, I just mean some kind of point cutting, jagged cutting, razor it, thin-end shears. You don't want a real sharp line, but you want a general idea of the length that they pointed out. And then when you pull it around to the back, watch what happens. I'm going to pull it to the back, turn her around, and you can kind of see that it's going to be a little bit longer in the center and a little shorter through here because it will naturally give that little natural arc because these pieces traveled a shorter distance in the front, so they get cut just a little bit more. The further distance preserves a little bit of length. So the next thing we're going to do is blend the sides. I'm going to call it step 2, and we're going to take a technique that is interesting. We're going to cut hair deep in the scissor right here. When you move this scissor a little bit here, wide open, about a 1/2 inch movement here is about a 1/8 inch movement here. When you close the scissor and get closer to the end, you're the same distance from the axis of the scissor here, so a little bitty movement here is a big movement here. So the point I'm making is that if you open the scissor wide, which looks real aggressive and dangerous, it is not, because a big movement is a tiny movement here. So what I'll do is I'll start to blend these sides, and I think you'll be able to see better if I do this side first. What I'm going to do is just grab some hair here, and she might already have some shorter hairs, and I want to start to blend some more. Now, I have learned if I open wide and I come in like this, yeah, that's what happens. That face gets a little scared. So I do tend to start here, open wide behind those eyeballs, and come in like this so she doesn't see it, and then I start to cut little bitty hairs like this. And I'm going to do a couple of different angles so you guys can possibly see. Big and wide, and I cut just a few hairs at a time to start to blend this side all of the way down. I can follow a few different senses. I am not just going by what it looks like. I can feel 1 or 2 or 3 hairs getting cut. I can feel that crunch. I can kind of hear it, and I can see it. So I'm kind of using everything at the same time when I'm doing this. I'm going in, and I'm sure you can't hear it, but she can hear it, and we can feel it, and we can see it. And I'm wondering if there's an angle that would make this easier to see. Let me try another angle here just so you guys can kind of see what's going on here. Now that was done with scissors. You can also play it a little safe. Use just 2 or 3 teeth deep in the texturizing shear and just kind of come down that whole side just using 2 or 3 teeth or just the tip of your tool and cut some hairs. This is a little safer. You don't have to be as skilled to do this, or you can do like me and you can do a little bit of both. I'll do a little texturizing on each side as I'm going down here on the sides, just to kind of add to the blending, and that gives me a good blend around the front. So I've got step 1 was the length. Step 2 was to blend around there. And then step 3 is the same technique I did around the front, but it's over the top. So now it's gonna be over the top of this hair blending. I think it's actually gonna be better if I turn it around the other way. So if I go over the top of her hair, and this would be a whole bunch of different sections. Let me switch tools here. I like to start in the center where the hair's the thickest. On the sides, it's going to start to be a little thinner because of the client's ears and less hair. On the back of the head, there's just a lot more hair going on. So let's play it safe and start where the hair's the thickest in the center and the back. And if I stick my fingers in here and grab a section of hair, I can feel on top of her head till I get down to where that top extension is and grab the client's hair, and you can see where it's supposed to blend. And then I can see the extensions have no layers underneath that. So if I start right there, lay the scissors down like this, and that same technique, cutting just a few hairs, I'm just cutting a few over the top like this to give it some layers. Takes out so little hair. And what I'll do is not even need a comb most of the time when I do that. So I'll just move over a little bit and take another section. And I already know the spot that I need to start doing it, but with this good color blend, I almost need to check a few times just to kind of double check I'm in the right place and start to layer over the top like this. Right on down to the end. I'm not going to bore you with doing every single section all the way around. We'll finish her haircut after the shoot, but I'm going to show you the next 2 steps because that was step 2, 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to go into 4 and 5 next. So as I start to blend this top, it starts to really look nice. And the reason for that is, you know how somebody's hair might frizz a little bit with the humidity? Well, if you don't have all those ends kind of at all the different levels, it won't frizz the same. She's always got new hairs growing in, so you've got length ending in all different places. So when her hair frizzes up from any humidity, not that we want frizz, but when it does, we want it to frizz equally down here, or at least blend equally when those little ends pop out. So those were the first 3 steps. Now what we're going to do is move into step 4 and 5. 4, you kind of gave you a little bit of a clue of where it is. I'll give you a little clue. It's where her hair meets the extensions. If I still see a little bit of a line here, I've layered from there down. Maybe it's her hair that is too thick. Now, if you did the step 1 in putting extensions in and you thinned out all her ends, this step is usually not as necessary, but it's a good place to check. What I do is I take, and in just 3 or 4 sections around here, I'll take her hair above the extensions, and you see there's the top of the extensions right there. Her top row of extensions, there's no blend problems now because I took the problem away. The problem is here. That's where that hair falls on top and possibly doesn't blend. So what I do is I pick it up, and the problem is either going to be at one end of the section or the other. Sometimes I'll lay it down and see, is it the top section or is it the bottom? And in this case, it's a little bit more at the bottom. So what I'll do is I'll pick this up, and it's the bottom that needs texturizing on those ends more than the top. So sure, I might texturize that top too, but maybe there. So I'm doing 2 things. I'm point cutting with thinning shears, or texturizing shears, or whatever you want to call them. So some people would be cutting across. To me, that's still even a line. It's just a dotted line. So I say take 2 techniques. Take a point cut and a thinning shear, and so you're doubling up on your texture technique and mostly focusing at the bottom. So what that does, it starts to soften her hair where it blends in, and I'll take another section here, and we could work around this whole top if we needed to by just taking a little bit of the old and a little of the new, and you can kind of see where it's a little thicker here. That's the ends that we're going to soften, and then go through all of this, and we can do as much or as little as we need to, and then that makes this so wispy that it just doesn't show a line in there when it blends. I would take that all the way around on both sides. Again, to keep this video shorter, I'm going to go into my 5th step, and I'm going to pick up a different tool. Nope, I'm going to use the same tool, and I'm going to take these ends. When we cut the length, I think this is going to be better. I'm going to take this length, and I want to get a section that cuts through all the way through from the top to the bottom. Doesn't matter how thick it is, but I want to see every row of extensions, strands, wefts, whatever it is. I want this very wide section to be collapsed down into a section that fits into my fingers. So what I'll do is I'll push this section down to fit into my fingers like this, and as I comb it out, I'm looking at these very, very ends. Where is the bluntness that's down here? It's hard to see because this hair falls over it. So what I learned a long time ago is that as I pull this section out, if I use gravity on my side, turn it sideways, then I can see all of the ends, and it's usually the very bottom section that needs to be thinned a little bit more, because all these top sections that I can cut a little bit more, they kind of got cut when we were cutting the length, when we were layering over the top. All these other techniques were starting to soften them. And if I look down at the bottom here and I decide, wow, that looks a little thick, I'm just going to chop, chop, chop with thinning shears, I end up thinning sections that don't need to be thinned and the thick sections at the same time. So instead, I was pulling it up like this one time, and I noticed that thick section at the bottom as I'm combing it like this. I pull it out, I start to get about right here, and I see at the bottom, like you guys, like there's the thick section. But as soon as my comb got through, it covered it up. And I was like, oh man, how am I gonna get that? And then it just, I don't know if I accidentally did it, but as I turned it like this, I could see, wow, okay, this is all blending pretty good. Sometimes I'll go in there and fix it a little, or I'll say, oh, I could thin that a little bit. But here's where the really big problem is. That bottom section is peeking through and making it look really, really thick on the ends, and that's the only section that needs to get thinned. So then I don't end up with too thin of hair down at the bottom. I just end up with something that looks a little more natural. And so I'll do that 2 or 3 times at the bottom, and that'll make her ends look natural. We got it here. So 5 simple steps. Cut the length in the front. 2, frame her face. 3, that same face framing technique, take it around the whole top. And then 4 is her ends, and 5 is the extension ends. Go through those techniques before you prejudge what it looks like, and then go back and look at it. And most of the time, it'll look great. Give it a try.